Impressive.
Save it.
So the sequel is here, Final Fantasy XIII-2. Comes as a follow-up to Final Fantasy XIII, obviously the game that came before it. I am of the camp that felt like Final Fantasy XIII got a little bit of a bad rap. Yeah, it wasn't one of the best Final Fantasies ever. About the first 30 hours or so were very, very corridor heavy, and that was the biggest problem with it. The story was a little bit convoluted and hard to follow. After you got past a lot of that, had a great deep combat system and the paradigm system, and the story, once it started to sink in, did get pretty interesting. So I'm glad there was a sequel for it, and given a chance to give it a playthrough and offer my thoughts on it. Now, if you haven't played Final Fantasy XIII and you're going to, you might want to stop here because this is going to be a little bit spoiler heavy for that one. It's really hard for me to continue without going through the way that game ended, because the way that Final Fantasy XIII-2 picks up is very affected by the ending sequence of Final Fantasy XIII. So, that in mind, spoiler warning. Okay, well, if you have played Final Fantasy XIII, then as you know, at the end of that game, there was the miracle of Cocoon. Vanille and Fang combined to form a crystal pillar that held up Cocoon so that it didn't crash into Pulse, causing deaths of countless people. It was a great triumphant moment at the end of that game. And Lightning, who was the protagonist of that game, finally succeeds in rescuing her sister Sarah. The reunion of Sarah and Snow, it's all a nice little touching experience. But right off the bat in Final Fantasy XIII-2, things look very different. The intro is Lightning in an area that looks very different from anything you saw in Final Fantasy XIII. She's decked out with armor, looking a lot more regal than she was in the game before it, and she's looking over this very bland, dark, lifeless kind of area. You find out that this is Valhalla, an area that's apart from time. It's a separate dimension. And you also see her fighting with another new character. He's got a big ass sword and they start fighting and it looks really epic and it looks really cool. And in the middle of this battle, there's the arrival of Null Christ. He shows up out of nowhere, seems to have a clue what's going on, and at some point during this battle, Lightning then tells Noel that he needs to go back in time to find her sister Sarah. So he goes into a time gate and is going back in time.
You want her? Then you're gonna have to go through me! Get up, Sarah.
You were in my dream. I saw you.
Save it for later. Can you fight?
If I have to?
You're gonna have to. One more thing. Don't ever lay down and wait to die!
This is not very long for a Final Fantasy game. You're used to games being about, 70, 80 hours even a lot of the time for Final Fantasy games. Final Fantasy XIII, for me, took me about 65 hours to get through. So it was a lengthy game. This is less than half the length. You could get to the end boss in this game in less than 20 hours. You just probably won't want to because you won't quite be ready for it. By the time I finished, I was about 25 hours through the game, and I was able to complete it.
It wasn't just me. You should probably thank this little guy, too.
Wow, is that a toy Moogle?
He's supposed to be your lucky charm. Your sister gave him to me.
Wait, you know Lightning?
Mm-hmm. She's the one who told me to come here.
Where did you see her?
If you play Final Fantasy XIII, you remember spending about the first 30 hours of it walking down corridors like this, getting into battles, and then going to another one. There'd be a little bit of a cutscene, and then you'd be doing this again. That got boring. Final Fantasy XIII-2, right off the bat, you get a different feel. First thing you can do once you gain full control of your characters after the introductory sequences is walk around and talk to anybody you want, like it's a town. What a concept! It's like a Final Fantasy game. It doesn't really add anything to the gameplay, but it does feel a little more immersive doing it that way. It helps to build the world, and that's a big improvement. But the big thing about Final Fantasy XIII-2 is it's all based on a timeline. It's all based on jumping around and trying to fix the future and save Sarah's sister Lightning. That brings up another thing right here though. If you really wanted to play as Lightning and you're looking forward to getting back into her shoes, you're going to be bummed out. Everything is about Sarah and Noel. But the time travel mechanic in this game really opens things up in a nice way. You go and do something in one timeline, which unlocks another one, you can always go back again. If you think there's things you haven't found, if there's something else you want to check out, there's side missions in this game, there's a lot of completionists out there, and they'll really want to spend some extra time with this, trying to get every little thing done and exploring every nook and cranny of every map.
But hey, I won't complain if we do end up there. All this running around is exhausting.
Hey, make up your mind.
Just be honest with yourself. If you are, you'll be sure to arrive in the future you want.
If there's anything we know about the Final Fantasy series, it's really set the bar high for presentation, and Final Fantasy XIII-2 is no exception. The game looks great. There might not be quite as many CGI sequences with the really silky smooth cutscenes in there as there were in the previous ones, but you almost don't even notice because the in-engine cutscenes look so good anyway, there's not much of a difference and you don't find yourself missing them that much. I mean, the only real difference is in those CGI sequences, everybody's got really individual hairs that are just hanging everywhere, and then you look at the in-engine ones and they're a little bit more clumps, and at that point, I mean, we're splitting hairs. Oh wait. Right from the get-go, you're going to be impressed by the way the game looks. Or if you've played a lot of other Final Fantasy games, you might not be surprised, but you should still be impressed. As strong as the visuals are in this game, though, there are some hiccups at times. During a lot of activity on the screen, you'll find some noticeable frame rate slowdowns, and they are noticeable. They don't happen that much, and they're not game breakers, but frame rate takes a hit at certain points. The sound is straight out of Final Fantasy XIII, they hit all the right notes on that one. Everything sounds like it should. The music. What can I say about the music? On the whole, it's fantastic. I mean, from a technical perspective, it's all composed very well. I mean, you could probably write a great college paper on the use of theme and variation from start to finish, especially as it references to the themes from Final Fantasy XIII. It's very well done, fits the narrative very well. For the most part, there's some very odd decisions here. There's this area called Serendipity, which I'll get into later, not my favorite part of this game, where you basically sounds like you're being serenaded by something straight out of the 80s. I kind of wanted to get the hell out of there as soon as I could. And there's a lot of songs where there's vocals accompanying them, which always seems like a strange decision. That's not different from Final Fantasy XIII, but I didn't think it was a great move in Final Fantasy XIII either. While you're running around the area, you're jumping around, you're getting into battles, and there's this singer. I don't know, it just doesn't feel like it really helps the situation. It feels almost more distracting than anything else. There's also some of these strange metal battles that end up triggering these songs that have like metal growling vocals, which also seem kind of out of place. You know, it kind of comes out of nowhere. But regardless, on the whole, if you compare the compositions and the songs to the vast majority of video games out there, this blows them away. There's just some very strange decisions that were made in the process. Now, where there are a lot of areas you can go back and forth, revisit areas, try things you didn't do before, there's a completely tacked-on world called Serendipity, and it's basically a casino. There's really nothing of value in this area at all. There's these chocobo races, and it's actually kind of a deep mechanic. Surprisingly, you could actually go through and really learn a lot about the way these work and actually groom your chocobo and try to get him to rise up the ranks in races. But unless you want to really sit down and play what is inherently a completely different game with very loose ties to the rest of the game, you're not really going to want to do it that much. I know I did. I had to spend a lot of time reading about it. You finally figure it out and you play it, and it's not that much fun. It wasn't for me. I wanted to leave, so I did. The other thing you can do there is you can go and play slot machines, which is about as much fun as playing slot machines in Atlantic City is without real money. I also had about the same amount of luck as I did in Atlantic City. Get me the f out of here. I don't like it. I want to go play the game. Luckily, there's nothing about that area that really makes it mandatory to be there. You can get in, you can go to the one key character that is important, and get out, get back to the game, get back to the good part. As for the pure gameplay and the battle mechanics, basically it was pulled straight from Final Fantasy XIII. You have the same paradigm mechanic, where you have a party of 3 people, and they each have specific roles. And you can set up ahead of time a bunch of different paradigms that would switch each character's role, and you can change them on the fly in the middle of battle. When I say roles, it's all the same roles in Final Fantasy XIII. You got your Commando, your Ravager, your Medic, your Saboteur, your Sentinel, and your Synergist. Whether it be defensive, healing, offensive, boosting the chain gauge. The best thing about it is it really makes every fight turn out to be more of a puzzle. Especially with some of the boss characters, some of the more difficult characters, you want to figure out what paradigms work best. I like it very much, and I'm very glad that this stayed in the game. One of the different things about the way the combat works with Final Fantasy XIII-2 is the way you get into fights. Final Fantasy XIII, you had those corridors and you're walking down, you see the enemies before you even get there, and you knew you had to walk to them, and you got up to them and you're like, okay, now I'm in a fight. And that kind of sucked. In Final Fantasy XIII-2, there's a new thing called the Mog Clock. You'll be walking through and there will be a random encounter, but it won't immediately pull you into the battle like in previous Final Fantasy games. Instead, it gives a circle area where the enemy appears. Either they might chase you, they might chase your companion. You have a clock that represents an amount of time you have in order to get into the battle in a preemptive strike mode. And that makes sure that everybody gets in there and gets an early attack. You start boosting their chain gauge. On the other hand, if the enemy gets to you before you strike them on the overworld, then it'll just be a regular kind of battle. Nobody ends up with an advantage. If you let the clock dwindle all the way without getting into the battle, without getting away, and without starting the battle yourself, then it ends up disabling the retry option in the battle. It's not too much of a penalty, but at least takes some of that chance away. You have some control over the starting conditions of battle, unlike a lot of the previous games where it was all picked at random.
Servant of Time, Daughter of Chaos, unto the world unseen, the Untamed You Guide.
What do you know? It talks.
Instead of the third person on your normally 3-person team, that's replaced by a monster in Final Fantasy XIII-2. And a monster will consist of an enemy that you had fought at some point in time that you will have ended up getting in the form of a crystal after beating them. So the big difference between monsters and then your main characters Noel and Sarah is that Noel and Sarah are able to switch roles on the fly. Each monster has a specific role. One might be a Ravager, one might be a Sentinel. You can't change that. But you can put different monsters into different paradigms when you're customizing them ahead of time. So when you get into battle and you switch your paradigm, it'll change the monster that's accompanying you at the time. Another new thing about battle in Final Fantasy XIII-2 is there's a wound mechanic this time around. And that means that enemies have the ability to inflict damage that actually takes down your maximum hit points. They might be inflicting wound damage to you and is backing off your HP a little by little and you're not really that worried about it. But you get into some situations where you're in some pretty lengthy battles, and before you know it, you're down to about 3/4 of your life, half your life, and all of a sudden you can't heal up past the yellow bar. It starts to freak you out, and it's certainly one more thing you have to worry about in battles in Final Fantasy XIII-2.
This jelly bean's ticking me off!
One thing that will be very familiar to you if you play Final Fantasy XIII is that Final Fantasy XIII-2 brings back the Crystarium to do your leveling up. Final Fantasy XIII gave you the option to kind of spider out and choose what you would do within a specific role when. There are no branching directions in this one, but it actually makes things a little bit easier, to be honest, and you still don't feel like you're missing anything. Every so often you get your moment where the Crystarium has been expanded, you have more options. You can maybe boost one of your existing roles, you can unlock a new role altogether, you can also increase your character's accessory capacity. And that brings me to another new thing about this. Each character has a capacity limit, which puts a cap on how many accessories you can have equipped at the same time. A lot of other games use the same exact mechanic, they just refer to it as weight. Certain items have a weight to them, and then the character only has a capacity to carry so much weight. It's the same exact mechanic here, but it does make things a little bit different in the way that you want to customize your characters. One last thing I want to talk about that's different about the battles in Final Fantasy XIII-2 is, if you remember from previous Final Fantasy games, in the middle of a battle or towards the end of a battle, might launch into more of a cinematic sequence, where you're watching a lot of things happen, you just go into complete spectator mode. They're very fun to watch and a lot of important things might happen, but there's really no interactive quality to it. That changes in Final Fantasy XIII-2. Some of these cutscenes during battle are accompanied by cinematic events. They're basically just quick time events a la Dragon's Lair, or for all you little people out there, God of War, if you don't know what I mean by Dragon's Lair. They're not major additions, but they do make these scenes more interactive, and they get you involved in a little bit more into some of these big key sequences.
Come on! All together! Now! With you! Yeah, do it! See if you like this! Sarah! Shoot!
Got it! Hit it!
Yeah!
So in a game like Final Fantasy, it's very plot heavy. Characters are going to play a pivotal role in how much you enjoy this game. And for the most part, the characters in this game are strong. There are some exceptions. There's Noel and Sarah, who are both strong characters in their own right, and I hope you like them, because if you don't, you're going to be spending the entire game playing as them. It's not like Final Fantasy XIII, where you keep switching between different combinations of characters, exploring different plot lines. You get Sarah, and you get Noel. Get used to it. What I would consider the strongest character in a Final Fantasy XIII-2 is actually the villain. It's Caius. He's pretty enigmatic. You don't know much about his motives as you go throughout the game until towards the end, but the more you find out about him, you actually can empathize with what he's going through and why he's doing what he's doing.
Then you must also understand that I am here for a reason. Your actions have necessitated the strictest sanctions.
You'll also remember the character Hope from Final Fantasy XIII, who was basically just a little kid at that point, all grown up, and this crazy smart guy in Final Fantasy XIII too. He plays actually a very pivotal role in the plot. There aren't too many negatives in the characters, but the ones that suck really suck. There's Alyssa, who is accompanying Hope for most of the game, and she's annoying as hell.
Oh! Come on, Director Hope! I want to show them! It's okay to show them, isn't it?
Right from the get-go, as soon as you meet her, you're kind of like, oh, hope this person doesn't hang around that long. But she kind of does, and it sucks. But she's not the worst. The worst is Chocolina. What the f were they thinking with Chocolina?
I'll sell you Chocobocolina! Welcome, get your traveling products here at Chocolina's Emporium. The beauty's all mine, but the products can be yours, but only if you show me the money. This might be a once-in-a-lifetime choco-amazing opportunity, so don't miss out.
Hi there. I'm a little overwhelmed and slightly confused, to be honest.
Now, she owns the shop in Final Fantasy XIII too. It's very important because that's how you get your new weapons, that's how you get the materials that level up your monsters in the Crystarium. Unfortunately, every time you walk up to her, she has to talk.
Come on! Lighten up and pull that gill out of your wallet!
I don't know what they were thinking. Throughout the 25 or 30 hours you will spend playing Final Fantasy XIII-2, the pacing is actually pretty good. And right after you get through those initial tutorial sequences, the plot thickens up nicely and quickly, so it really gets you invested and interested. And unlike Final Fantasy XIII, the plot is not so clumsy and convoluted and difficult to follow. You'll know exactly what's going on the whole time, and it's still interesting, so that's a nice achievement. But just as things are trotting along at a nice consistent pace, there is one point right about the middle of the game where you're sent out a hunt to find all these different items, and things really slow down majorly. And that's probably the only part of the game that I could say was truly straight up boring. But it's worth it to stick it out because the parts that come after that are probably the best parts of the game. So with all that said, let's get to the bottom line. I'm gonna give Final Fantasy XIII-2 a 4 out of 5. It's a great game. It's better than Final Fantasy XIII was. Yes, it's a lot shorter. Yes, some of the characters are a little bit annoying. Yes, there's a little bit of fluff and tacked on sequences. But on the whole, this game took what was good about Final Fantasy XIII and improved on the bad things about it. It's a whole lot less linear. The story is more clear and concise and easier to follow and still manages to be good. If you played all the way to the end of the Final Fantasy XIII and didn't hate it, this is a no-brainer. You should pick up Final Fantasy XIII too. Now I want to know your thoughts as well, so if you agree or disagree with anything said in the review, put it in your comments below. And as always, thank you for visiting defaultprime.com, and thanks for watching the Bowlingotter Show. See you next time.
First, buy something from my shop. Then, look for an exit so I can get out of here.